The federal government says it is considering slapping a surtax on imports of electric vehicles made in China. They are flooding the global market right now thanks to subsidies from the Chinese government. Catherine Cullen has more.
The most important people here today.
Surrounded by auto sector workers, Chrystia Freeland pledged to push back against China for them, starting with consultations on just how strong that pushback should be.
We are going to protect you and defend you from unfair competition.
But the pledge to stop an oversupply of Chinese-made vehicles from flooding Canada is also about domestic and international pressures.
The government clearly had no choice. China clearly has a leg up on the competition because of all the subsidies that they have given to their industry.
A threat when Canada's government has invested tens of billions in the sector.
We have been working tirelessly at this.
There's also a concern about keeping up with allies. Earlier this month, the European Union hit Chinese vehicles with new tariffs of up to 38%. And in May, the United States leveled a tariff of 100% while slamming Chinese economic practices.
It's not competition, it's cheating.
China's government has firmly rejected allegations it's behaving unfairly, describing the EU accusations as being without factual and legal basis. Next week, Canada's government will begin a 30-day consultation about how to proceed.
Nothing is ruled out, and all possible tools are on the table.
But what about the fact that the Canadian government wants Canadians to switch over to EVs, and China is supplying them?
We also do not believe that the path to climate action is based on production which is made using low environmental standards, using low labor standards, and potentially threatening our security.
Freeland was asked about the potential that China could hit back with economic sanctions of its own. She says the government will take that into consideration, but it needs to defend Canada's national interest. Catherine Cullen, CBC News, Ottawa.
For more on how this could affect the auto industry, I'm joined now by Brian Kingston, the president and CEO of the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association. Brian Kingston, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you.
So the 30-day consultation will start on July 2nd. I mean, we could be a little over a month away from a trade war with China. Is this what the industry needs?
Yeah, I mean, this is a step in the right direction because we know that China has capacity now to satisfy domestic demand twice over. And we've seen what happens in other markets. The European Union is a good example where their market share may go almost to 25% in very short order. So action is required, and it's good that the federal government has recognized this and is now launching a process to make sure that we have the tools available to protect our market and build out our EV supply chain.
Are you worried mostly about Chinese-owned companies that make vehicles, or like because Tesla is making things at its gigaplant in Shanghai? I mean, what's the bigger concern here?
Anything that is manufactured in China that has been benefiting from these subsidies. I mean, the recent estimates are that the Chinese EV industry has received over $230 billion in government subsidies going back about 15 years. These are unprecedented amounts of money which have supported the development and the capacity of this industry. We cannot, particularly at a time when Canada is investing in the industry here to employ Canadians, over $40 billion in new investment, we cannot allow that to undermine this supply chain.
But one country's subsidy is another country's investment, right? I mean, we've got the Inflation Reduction Act happening in the United States, which is production subsidies at the back end, the deals here with Stellantis, LG, with Volkswagen. How is this different in terms of trade practice?
If you look at the subsidies and the supports that have been rolled out across North America to build this supply chain, it pales in comparison to what China has done. If you go back to 2015, Made in China 2025 was their industrial policy, and it made it crystal clear they want to dominate the global EV market, and that is now coming to fruition. We have an opportunity here that is unprecedented because of our critical minerals, because of our existing automotive industry. We can be part of this emerging North American EV supply chain, but if we allow non-market economies to come in and undermine that, we're going to put all that investment at risk.
Well, that's the key thing, non-market economies, right? The free market reigns in Canada, the US, Europe, and China is a state-controlled economy. But, where do you think Canada should go with this? I mean, Joe Biden's looking at 100% tariff. Europe's is lower, I think capping out at about 38, and there's going to be retaliation and pushback from China. Where would you recommend Canada goes?
I'd like to see a number of actions. I mean, the tariff is the most obvious instrument. It's a blunt instrument, but we do have to make sure the Americans know that we are aligned with them on the approach to China. But there are other policies that we should be looking at. Canada has a disconnect right now between its environmental policies and its industrial policy. We have an EV mandate that has no concern whatsoever for where those EVs are manufactured. That's a problem. We have a purchase incentive program, which is subsidizing to a huge extent Chinese manufactured vehicles. That should be looked at. And there are real security concerns about these vehicles and how this information is gathered.
Okay, well, yes, I talked to Vic Fideli about this. He said these are computers on wheels, and where do you want those computers made is part of his concern. But the incentives, right now it's a $5,000 regardless of where the electric vehicle is made. So do you want that increased, or say increased for North American made, or just reserved exclusively for North American made vehicles?
Yeah, I think we should take a page out of the Americans' book on this one. If you look at what the Biden administration has done with the Inflation Reduction Act, they have tied everything to supporting the U.S. industry and the broader North American auto supply chain. So their incentive has very strict requirements around what vehicles qualify, with emphasis on North American and American manufactured vehicles. Our incentive has no such parameters, and that's a problem given all of the investments. And we have EVs rolling off the line right here today in Canada. Let's support those and make sure that we're not undermining our own policies.
But you know, the consumer at home may say that, you know, people buy a lot of stuff from China, and we've been conditioned to do that since sort of the globalization era of the 90s because it's cheaper. And people may say, I want an electric vehicle, but at a price point of $30,000 or less. China can give me that. North America, Europe, and the other big Asian makers maybe can't.
Well, we should definitely not do that at the expense of environmental standards and labor standards. And secondly, manufacturers are rolling out EVs at an unprecedented pace. We've got 90 models here now in Canada available to consumers. And as these investments ramp up, we're going to see economies of scale. And with that will come a decline in prices. We're not there today, but as we get towards the end of this decade, prices will come down as this technology becomes more feasible for the mass market.
Okay, but you know, we've talked before. There's not enough charging stations. Government's not investing in charging stations. Now we're looking at trade fights with China. You have other sectors like canola, beef, pork, other parts of the Canadian economy, maybe not as big as the U.S. trade, but they could be caught up in protecting what is a central Canadian focused industry.
Yes, the industry, of course, is centered in Ontario and Quebec, but what makes this so exciting for Canada is this EV supply chain creates opportunities across the country. If we can actually get to a point where we're seeing critical minerals projects coming online, mining, processing, this industry benefits all of Canada, not just Ontario. Not only that, but it is our second largest export. So this is a huge industry that has a massive economic spin-off for the whole Canadian economy. And again, if we get the policies right, I think this is a generational opportunity.
Do you think they can have this done, just as a final point? Like, I think the U.S.'s tariffs come in on the 1st of August, right around there. Do you think Canada can be in position to
I think so.
match that?
I think so. Yeah, it'll be a very quick consultation, but given the tools that they have available, in particular Section 53, which allows you to increase tariffs, that can be done quite rapidly once the decision is made. So I think they'll have the ability to get this in place in the time required.
Okay, Brian Kingston, always appreciate the time. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.